So thank you again for being here. It's so lovely to see you. My name is Pippa Stacey. I work as a writer and a blogger, but I'm here today in my capacity at Astriid. I work as a communication consultant for the charity. I've been with the charity since 2019, I believe. And in a nutshell, Astriid is a really lovely small charity that matches talented people with chronic illnesses with inclusive employment opportunities, of which there will be plenty more coming up in the future, I should hope. But as well as the job matching, Astriid also supports people at all different stages of what we call their work ready journey. So if somebody isn't quite ready to enter the world of work yet, we also support them with mentoring and work experience and getting those skills up, all of those transferable skills that is going to enable them to find employment that suits their needs and is sustainable in the longer term, as well as being really fulfilling as well. I think that's important to say. So if you see me glancing off to the side here, it's because I have some notes on my screen. I'm sure everybody who's here today will be familiar with the joys of brain fog, and that is something that has come in full force for me today on this Tuesday. So that's what I'm doing. I think I just saw a question. Yes. Oh yeah, sorry, I preempted your question. Yes, there will be a way to watch this later. So like I said, feel free to duck in and out as you need. We will go through this at a nice pace, I hope. And also please feel free to ask any questions or pop any of your own thoughts in the chat box all the way through. It would be really lovely to hear from you, and we'll probably come to those at the end, just so I can keep on top of what's on the screen at any given time, because like I say, the joys of brain fog. Just admitting a few more people, and right, let's crack on. Okay, so if you've joined this session today, the chances are you're a student or a graduate with a chronic illness. And you will know firsthand that when you're in university, whether that's in-person university or you're studying remotely, chatter about employment and life after university begins quite early on. Sometimes it can seem as though you've only been there a week and it's already talking about life and the future and all of the things that come after it. And I know from experience that when it feels like it's taking everything you have just to keep on top of your studies while managing your health condition day to day, that sort of chatter can feel really overwhelming really quickly. I've been there myself. I should say as well, I was a student. I studied an undergraduate degree in psychology and education at the University of York and graduated in 2016. And I personally acquired my chronic illness halfway through university. So I had a very quick adjustment period between, I'd met someone else. Yeah, so I started university as a non-disabled student and I ended university as somebody very much in the chronic illness community. So essentially with this session today, I hope to share just a few of the ways we can make finding and completing work experience and internships much more flexible and also compatible alongside studying with a chronic illness. I'm going to take you through all of this content to start with, and then hopefully at the end, we'll have time for questions and discussions. I'm multitasking here because we've got people joining. This will get better, I promise. I think we've got the majority in now. So yeah, like I said, if any questions or thoughts crop up, please feel free to leave them in the comments box. Okay, right. So if you're here, I'm sure you're already very aware of the benefits of work experience and internships, but just to recap a few of the benefits, going through that can offer valuable experience in your chosen field that you want to go into. Having the right kind of experience can really boost your CV and make you stand out. And also making contacts through work experience and internship can play a pivotal role in your future employability. And I think we're all beginning to realise just how vital networking is in the competitive employment sector as it is today. So we obviously all know that these things are good things and they're really good things to have, and it's worth trying to do. But what we really want to focus on here is how we can approach these things in a way that suits you as an individual and most importantly, doesn't jeopardise your health. So with that in mind, before you even begin looking for these opportunities that you're seeking, there are three things that I want you to ask yourself. The first is, what kind of commitment is manageable alongside your academic worth and other life responsibilities? And by this, and I feel like such a hypocrite for saying this because this was something I really had to learn, I don't mean what's going to be doable if you're really pushing yourself and burning yourself out. When you're thinking about how much you can manage, I want you to think about what's doable in a way that's safe and sustainable for you over the longer term. So you might think, oh, if I really push myself, I can do 5 hours a week and, I'll power through and it'll be okay. But if that's going to make you ill for days and days as a result, then really that's not something that's sustainable, because to make that happen, you're going to have to compromise on something else. And that something else might even be your well-being. And we definitely don't want to be doing that here. If you're in doubt with this, I would always advise taking on maybe slightly less than what you think you're capable of. Because in doing that, it'll give you some leeway to help you adjust. And you can always build up that amount later. So I always think it's better to start with a little bit less than you think you're capable of. And that can be a really good way of just testing the waters, seeing what's feasible. And then if you feel like you have the capacity to do more, that's great. And that's something that you can look to take on. But if you don't, you haven't jeopardized your health in the process. And that's what we're here for. The second thing I want you to think about is what kind of timing would be best for you. So it might be that you would prefer to do a set period of work experience or a set length of internship during the longer university holidays than it would be during term time. So obviously the benefit of that is that if you're doing it over the holidays, you're not going to be juggling as much academic work. You've got more usable energy you can give to these things. And then other things to think about are whether your symptoms are more manageable at certain points in the year. For example, many people experience more relief for their symptoms during the warmer months than the colder months that we're going into at the moment. Good luck, everyone. And again, just timings during the day as well. All of these things, I'm sure you will be sat here now if you're somebody with a chronic illness and you already have an idea in your head of when you're at your best. So it might be that your cognitive abilities are better in the afternoon rather than when you wake up first thing. Or it might be that you need a rest at certain times in the day when your energy dips. So I think it's really valuable to make a note of what your ideal timings would be, not just in the day, but in the overall year and the academic calendar as well, because there is flexibility with these things. It might not seem like it on the surface, but as we'll go on to talk about, there always is flexibility with these things. And it does mean that if you've already thought about these things in advance, if somebody asks you about your ideal timings, you will have a simple answer to give them, which is always beneficial, I find. And the third thing I want you to think about, first of all, is what would genuinely give you valuable experience and skills that you're going to be able to use in the future? I think often, and again, I hold my hands up, very, very guilty of this, we're conditioned to throw ourselves at any opportunity that we see that vaguely looks like it might be relevant to us and what we want to go into. But when you're dealing with limited energy, which comes with lots of chronic illnesses, I think it's even more important to think about opportunities critically. Really think about what skills you're hoping to develop through work experience and internships, and what kind of specific environment you're looking to gain experience in. So you might see an opportunity crop up and you think, oh yeah, I can probably do that, and it might be helpful. But sometimes it can be worth hanging on because it might be that there's something better out there. And I know that's easier said than done, because again, we're in this hustle culture at university where you're encouraged to do all of the things all of the time. But yeah, we will touch on this more later, because again, there might be alternatives out there that are going to be more inclusive for you. Just going to check on the waiting room situation. If somebody could confirm that you can still hear me okay, because I'm paranoid. If anyone can pop in the chat and just let me know you can still hear me okay, that would be wonderful, because I'm multitasking again here. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All good.
Oh, good. Right. Okay. So now we've thought about those key fundamentals, I want to talk about how we can challenge what we typically think about work experience and internships, and touch on some of the reasonable adjustments that can make any opportunities you find more inclusive. So even if you want to apply for work experience or internships that aren't necessarily designed for disabled students, it's important to know that as a student, you are still entitled to reasonable adjustments, similar to those you might see in the workplace. And again, the use of the word reasonable can be a bit of a question mark. So at Astriid, we prefer to refer to them as workplace adjustments, because all reasonable adjustments are, of course, reasonable, but we won't get into that now. So The first one is a really obvious one, and one we all know very well after the year or so we've had, and that is that you can carry out your duties online or remotely without being there in person. Or you could even perhaps do a hybrid of the two so that you have the experience of both. Depending on the industry you're in, I know it can be really valuable to attend things in person and get that skill level that you might need. So it's important to remember that it doesn't always have to be one or the other. Sometimes a hybrid can be the most beneficial in that you get the most out of the experience, but you can also manage your condition better as well. And obviously, given the time that we've all gone through, people are more open to remote experience than they've ever been before. So it's a really good time to be asking about those things. And I would encourage you to be brave about that. I think it's helpful to be prepared to give examples of tasks that you could do remotely within that specific opportunity. And that's a really key way of demonstrating how and where you can add value, which is really important when you're a student hoping to pursue opportunities. You can also tailor your hours and your working patterns around what suits you. And I want to tackle this notion of interns or assistants, hustling and working 24/7 and burning themselves out. Again, we've been conditioned that that's what's normal if you really want to climb the ladder and get yourself out there. But instead, as somebody with a chronic illness, it might be that you work better for just a few hours at a time, or if you space out your work throughout the week. I have a condition called ME, and a big part of ME is avoiding something called the boom and bust, which is where you go all in for one period of time and then you're just flat out because it's completely burned you out. And instead of going the ups and downs like this, it's all about keeping a level like this. And work experience and internships as a disabled student don't necessarily have to compromise that. So that's something that I think it's important to challenge as well. I did an internship during university, and during that internship, it was a scheme designed for disabled students, and I have had a look and sadly it doesn't exist anymore. I studied in York, but the internship was in Newcastle. So I moved up to Newcastle for, I think it was about 8 weeks. But even while I was there, and even though I'd moved specifically for it and had my accommodation and everything provided, I worked 2 hours a day because that is what my limit was. And they accepted that and they understood that. So I went into the office for 2 hours a day. If I felt up to it, I did a little bit of work in the evening at home. But that was the kind of boundary I set, and they respected that. And I also did an internship as a graduate. So after I finished university, and during that time, it was kind of essential that I needed to work longer hours, but I did them in a pattern. So instead of doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then resting for the rest of the week, I did Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because that gave me a day in between to rest and recover, and again, keep things more close to the baseline, I suppose. It all ties into a much bigger conversation about condition management. But again, I'm sure if you're here, you know that conversation all too well. Finally, on this point, I really want you to know that you can have the autonomy to be a real part of the team as an intern or as somebody doing work experience. And you're not just there as an assistant. I really think the conversation around internships is changing at the minute, and all the more so for disabled students. So just because you happen to be a student or you happen to have a chronic illness doesn't have to be a barrier that stops you from becoming a real part of the team and finding an arrangement that's mutually beneficial. And by that, I mean, you're not just kind of there as tokenism or there as part of a scheme. It's about really finding what you can do to show your worth and add value to that team as well. Oh, admit somebody else. And I really believe we're moving past a time where work experience is just about making the coffee or maybe tidying the supply cupboards, because believe me, I've done that as well. So my advice here is really just to always remember your worth and how much you have to offer. And if you go into a situation knowing that, it's much more likely that the people around you are going to see that as well. Yep, doing okay time-wise. So my final point before we move on to the hows and wheres to actually find inclusive opportunities is around paid and voluntary work and which one is truly right for you. And again, I think this is a really important conversation to be having at the minute. So first of all, I want to make clear that when people reach a certain point in their education or their career, they should be paid for their time. Regardless of whether you're a disabled student or not, you should be paid for your time. And that holds true even when reasonable adjustments are in place and opportunities are tailored to make them more inclusive for you. You should still be entitled to the same level of pay as somebody who doesn't have these things in place. It's sad that that even has to be said, but it's really important to remember. Now, I do want you to hear me out with this one, bearing all of that in mind, because sometimes, and again, in my own experience, I've found this, voluntary work can have surprising benefits without compromising your future employability. And the main one, in my opinion, is that voluntary work tends to be much more flexible for people with chronic illnesses, and it can be a lot more personal too. And when you're in that kind of environment, that can take a lot of the pressure off you. So if you have a fluctuating illness, or you're really struggling with your condition management at this point in time, or this is perhaps your first experience of work, I would say that voluntary work could be a really good starting point just for testing the waters. Not only your capabilities and how you can manage it, but also your interests as well. And the beauty of that is that you can do that without being tied to a contract or workplace policies. So there's much more flexibility to really explore and see what works for you. And once you've had that experience, you might feel much more confident and assured about your needs, and can then go on to find the paid work that's really going to move things forward for you. And it's also not unheard of that starting out as a volunteer can lead to paid work in the future. And that can be either during your degree or after you graduate. Again, this is something I've personally experienced more than once as somebody working in the charity sector. So I've started off as a volunteer for an organisation, being able to test my working patterns as well as demonstrate my skills, and then gone on to become a part of that team, either as an employee or a freelancer. So just because you start off in one doesn't mean that you can't kind of evolve into the other one. So I do think it's important to seek paid work, but don't be afraid of voluntary as long as you see it as a stepping stone rather than a final destination. So where can we find these magical opportunities? This is what we're all here for. First, I'm going to share some schemes that are designed to be inclusive and designed for disabled and chronically ill people. But then something I really want to talk about is how you might approach external organisations who aren't on that list and who might be more closely related to what you want to go into or what you're studying, and convince them to create the opportunities for you, because that's how I think we can really move things forward. So rather than rattling off rather than rattling off a list of all the different schemes, I am going to paste in the chat box at the end of this a link to a blog post where I've listed all of the schemes I know of, all of the different charities and organisations, and it's all in a post on my blog. I'm going to drop a link directly to that at the end, and I hope that's something that you can bookmark and look back on. To give you a flavour of what's out there, we do have schemes like Leonard Cheshire's Change 100, which is paid internships for students and graduates. There's also platforms like Employability, which share opportunities for graduates. Big media companies like BBC and Channel 4, they offer talent acquisition schemes in lots of different industries, and they are, again, specifically for disabled people at the start of their career. And there are also big disability charities like Scope that offer internships and mentoring programs that are designed for individuals. Scope is actually how I started out, and that was a really, really positive experience, and one which I really think transformed my views of work as somebody with a chronic illness. This, of course, is also the time where I'm obviously going to plug Astriid, and I'm not doing that because I feel like I have to, but because they are a genuinely brilliant platform that's changing the game for people with chronic illnesses. So like I said at the start, we focus mostly on connecting people with chronic illnesses with inclusive employment opportunities. But if you register for the platform at any stage and speak to one of our candidate coordinators, they will go above and beyond to understand your needs and the kind of opportunities you're looking for. And it's not a case of, oh, they'll probably be suitable for this, so they can do this. It's much more about listening to what you want, what you as an individual feel are your goals and your passions, and we work around that rather than just trying to shove people into pathways where they might perhaps fit, and it's just a bonus if they happen to like the thing. I really think we're at a point in time where we're moving past that now. And that's something that I really think is one of the big benefits of Astriid. We also have a fortnightly opportunities newsletter, which I think would be quite a good resource to sign up for if you're a chronically ill student. And in that newsletter, we send out loads of schemes and opportunities that have been spotted that week. They are put together by a really brilliant team member called Kat. And just all bits and pieces and different tools and resources and stuff like that. And I think that can be a really good and really energy efficient way of scoping what's out there. Even if you're not seeking work in the here and now, it can kind of give you a taste of what's out there. And the other thing to say as well is that you can find loads of stuff from Astriid, obviously, on our website, which I will leave linked in the resources. If you're a graduate, we would particularly love to hear you, because we have some really, really cool opportunities that have been coming up at the minute, and we're desperate to find people who are really going to love and appreciate them. It makes me really happy. Companies and organisations are really starting to work up to the value of people with chronic illnesses and the invisible talent pool. So whether you're a graduate or even if you're a student and you're looking for internships and you're just looking to test the waters, please don't hesitate to get in touch, because we have a really, really brilliant candidate coordinator team, and I'm sure they would absolutely love to hear from you. Okay, so that's kind of what's already out there. But next I wanted to talk about creating your own opportunities. And this is something which I think holds so much power if you're a student with a chronic illness. And I think if you're here today, that tells me that you're somebody who's proactive about wanting to make the best of things and really pave a way for yourself. So I hope this particularly speaks to you. It's something that I felt spoke to me, so I'm really happy to be able to share it with you. So when it comes to creating your own opportunities, I think it's really important to remember that you have things to offer, and you should definitely have the confidence to reach out to businesses and organisations who you might want to work with. It doesn't matter if they've put a call out or if they've put a scheme out. You don't have to have a reason to get in touch with them and introduce yourself. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who's offering your valuable skills and expertise to support them with their mission. And I know it can feel a little bit scary to reach out, but the worst that can happen is they say no. And trust me, the world will keep on turning. Been there as well. So if you do decide you want to reach out to somebody, before you draft that initial email, I think it's really important to take a moment to think about those same areas that we touched on before. So what skills you want to develop by working with this particular organisation, what arrangement might be the most accessible for you, and what would really set you apart in a future job application. So you've found an organisation that resonates with you and your sector, your degree, what you want to go into. Really think about why you want to work with them and what you want to get out with it, because once you've got that straight in your head, everything else will fall into place as well. Another point I'd be especially keen to emphasize if you're reaching out to people yourself is that in this case, sometimes approaching the smaller businesses or organizations, or perhaps the charity sector, can be the most effective and mutually beneficial approach. I know that you might perhaps be worried about having a less recognizable name on your CV might seem less prestigious in the future. But often, if you're going for a smaller organization, you might have a wider role to play, and with that, more opportunities to learn and also to work independently and make an impact. So I suppose it's the whole big fish in a small pond versus small fish in a big pond thing. And there are definitely pros and cons to each of them. And I think you will know which of those resonates with you the most. But I would just say don't rule it out, because there is, although it's good to be in with the big organizations and to have that name behind you, there's a lot to be gained from the smaller ones as well. So thinking about the specific things you could do for these organizations, the things you might proactively suggest or put yourself forward for. If your chronic illness significantly affects your day-to-day life, the one thing I'd recommend pursuing over anything else, at least as a starting point or to start off with, is some kind of social media role for a smaller charity. And I know that might sound really niche, especially if it's not something you'd considered before. But the reason I say that is that if you're involved with that, you are, one, developing a really, really sought after skill. Believe me, a really sought after skill at the minute. That demand is just only going to increase for. Social media work is nice and flexible. so it can be done remotely in a way that suits you. And even in just producing social media content, you can get to learn about so many other elements of a charity or an operating business or an organization. Social media work often encompasses things like fundraising, business management, event management, service user facing roles, services the charity offers. So what you can end up with from what seems like quite a niche and specific engagement, I suppose, is an inclusive but a nice and well-rounded experience, and one that you'll be able to come away from and say, I learned this, this, and this in the future, and this is how this makes me suitable for this, this, and this. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. I felt it was important to share that because if it's not something you've considered, I really hope that is something you will be able to consider. I am going to do a cheeky plug here and mention my ebook, and that goes into a lot more depth about creating your own opportunities through what I've termed active networking and passive networking. That ebook is called How to Network Online. I've kept it as affordable as possible, and you can find it on my website. I will link it in the resources I'm going to send out at the end. I also write lots about my own experiences of working in the charity sector, becoming a chronically ill freelancer. And perhaps if videos are more accessible to you than reading blog posts, there's a few videos on my YouTube channel as well. And Astriid also have a developing YouTube channel, and that has a much more diverse range of experiences and people's stories, which I hope will resonate with you and give you some ideas as well. I think it's always important to look at these things critically and consider how they might apply to you in your own situation. Oh gosh, we're actually bulldozing through this. I'm just going to come on to a final kind of summary, but like I said earlier, if you have any thoughts or questions you want to share, we're going to have lots of time to discuss, so please feel free to leave them in the chat and we will come to them shortly. But just to kind of sum things up for now, I just want to share 3 of what I think are the most important things when it comes to finding inclusive work experience and internships during your degree. The first, and I cannot say this enough times, is to know your worth. So chronic illness or no chronic illness, you have so much to offer, and that should never be taken for granted or be seen as less as any other student going through this same thing. Please don't be afraid to stand your ground and advocate for what you need to thrive, because it's much better to do that than to suffer or have your health face a knockback as a result. And I mean that in the sense of whether it's in terms of negotiating reasonable adjustments like we've talked about, or just navigating day-to-day work opportunities as well. The second thing I wanted to highlight is to keep sight of the bigger picture. Like I said earlier, it can be really, really tempting to just leap at any rogue opportunity that looks like it might be doable for you and remotely helpful. But when you have limited energy and you're negotiating things like chronic pain and chronic fatigue, I really think it pays to be selective. And I know that's easier said than done. Believe me, I really, really do. But it's really okay to hold out for something and wait for something that feels like the right fit for you, that's really going to set you apart and help you in the future. Or equally, to decide what you want and to go after it yourself. So you might be waiting for an opportunity and find that it's just never coming and you're never finding something that's quite right. And that, I think, more than anything else, is the sign to put yourself out there and go after it yourself. And I hope, if nothing else, this has given you the confidence to do that, because I know it can feel scary to send that initial email and to reach out to somebody. But trust me, the rewards can be really, really great. Definitely really great. And finally, as with everything else, and just to sum up, health and well-being should always come first. I know how easy it can be to get caught up with the university bubble and this productivity culture that seems to dominate everything you see about student life at the minute. But please consider this your permission to let your health and well-being lead the way. Even if that means that looking for work experience or internships isn't necessarily the right decision for you at this moment in time, that in itself is a proactive step forward, because recognizing that isn't always an easy thing to do. And again, that shows that you're willing to do what it takes to consider the longer term. And it's all about the longer term. There's absolutely no gain in burning yourself out in the shorter term. It's all about the longer term and seeing the bigger picture. And there's always going to be time in the future. Again, I know that when you're a student, it can seem as though everything is about the now, now, now. But there is so much time ahead of you. There is so much scope to do all of the things you love and bring you purpose in the future. So don't beat yourself up if it's not doable for you right now. And I just think you never have to jeopardize one thing for the sake of another. So in the past, working with a chronic illness has always required a big sacrifice on the part of the person who's working, and to an extent it still does. But I hope it encourages you to know that things really are changing at the minute. We really are seeing that change come at Astriid. And it's all about finding stuff that's, again, going to be sustainable. It's not about making yourself ill or feeling as though you have to be a certain way to make things happen. It's all about finding what's going to work for you as an individual, not just for your health, but with your ambitions as well. So with that, thank you very much for listening and for being here today. I can't believe that. I've just absolutely bulldozed through that. I'm going to pop those helpful links in the chat now, but I really would encourage you to come over to Astriid and find out more about our work. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with the team, because like I said, the caliber of the opportunities we have coming in and the businesses who are reaching out to us and having those conversations with us, it's something else. Things really are starting to pick up, and it's such an encouraging thing to see. We'd really love to hear from talented students and graduates, especially people who are beginning to seek work for themselves. So you can go to the website astriid.org. You can sign up as a candidate, or you can simply reach out to talk to a team member. We also have that opportunities newsletter that goes out fortnightly, and you can find that on the website as well. If you want to find more from me, you can find me at Life of Pippa. I have a blog called Life of Pippa. I'm on social media as well, but I'm more often than not. I talk a lot about inclusive education and employment because it's close to my heart, but I also talk about the names of the cats on Cats Protection website and the best places to find novelty pajamas and all sorts of rubbish like that. Okay. Pop in resources in the chat. If you have any questions or discussion points, maybe even if you want to share your own experiences, please feel free to do that. Resources. If you are watching a recording of this, I will make sure this list of resources that I've just popped in the chat is available as well. And I'm going to have a glug of water, but yeah, please feel free to share anything you like. Oh, really good questions coming in. Oh yes, this is good. Okay. Thank you for the kind words as well. I really appreciate it. So one question is, would you suggest mentioning your limitations or illnesses in your CV, or wait until the interview stage? Now, that's a really timely question, because earlier this year, we actually released a research report at Astriid diving into some of the barriers that people with chronic illnesses face during the recruitment stage. And I suppose the short answer to that question is there's no right or wrong answer. There is no specific time where it is the right time or the wrong time. And from what other people said, it seemed to very much depend on the context and your gut feeling. So some people preferred to wait until they had secured the job role, and then when the discussion about reasonable adjustments came up, that is when they would disclose and talk about the things they needed. Others had a completely opposite experience, and they felt that their illness impacted them so severely that they couldn't not mention it, and they wanted employers to be aware of that as early as possible. So I think it very much depends on the specific context and what you feel you're comfortable with. There are pros and cons to each. And something else I think is really notable about people with chronic illnesses and disabled people is that often we've found ways to use the challenges of chronic illness as a way of demonstrating our transferable skills and our employability. So if you do feel like you want to mention it in your CV, you could talk about how perhaps your chronic illness has taught you valuable skills like resilience, time management, advocacy. There are so many transferable skills that come from simply living with a chronic illness. So it can be really cool to highlight those. And equally, in an interview, if you're getting a good vibe off somebody, having an open conversation at that stage can actually be a really positive thing. So don't be afraid to do whatever feels right to you. I wish I had a more concrete answer and I could say this is the ideal time and this is when it's going to be fine. But I hope that's somewhat helpful. And if you're interested, it's a lengthy report, but if you're interested, that report is also available on the Astriid website. It's called Employment and Long-Term Illness, the Invisible Talent Pool. And we looked at applications and interviews, but we also looked at things like work-life balance when you have a chronic illness, attitudes from employers, reasonable adjustments, some really telling findings in that. So yeah, I hope you find that interesting if you do decide to read. The next question is, what about mature students over the age of 50? We are dealing with age barriers too. That's a really good point. And although that's something I can't relate to on a personal level, and I won't pretend to be able to relate to that, I can imagine that would add another layer to it all, another element to it all. If that's you, and if you're comfortable with it, I would really, really encourage you to get in touch with Astriid, because I get the feeling that we might be able to help with that one. I think with age, there are so many transferable skills that come from that. And I think you will know that and how you can use that to demonstrate your employability and what you're hoping to move into. And I know it's easier said than done, but I would encourage you to own it. I really, really would. So please don't hesitate to get in touch, because I really feel like our team might be able to help you with that. I feel like they will have some more niche guidance, our candidate coordinators, to help with that one. They are probably better placed to advise with that one than me. But thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a really important point to highlight. So thank you for that. Oh, I've spotted another one. Sorry, I missed this one before. Do you have any tips on how to disclose your condition to an employer after securing an opportunity, e.g. how to word it and tell them which adjustments you would like? Okay, so we kind of maybe touched on that one a little bit. But I suppose if after you've secured the opportunity and you haven't mentioned your needs or adjustments before that, it might be that you would be more comfortable with a call. So just drop them a message and say, do you have a bit of time this week to have a chat about reasonable adjustments ahead of the role? Alternatively, and I think this is what I would do, you might prefer to draft an email and really think about your wording and stuff. I think in terms of how to word it, it could just be, maybe there's a resource we could put together actually, but I think it would be a case of saying, thank you again for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to working with you. So that I can give my best to this role and give you my all, it would be really helpful if we could implement this because of this, this because of this, and this because of this. So you're saying, this is the reasonable adjustment, this is why I need it. And you're ultimately painting the picture that if you have these things in place, it's going to enable you to manage your health. And not only that, be your very best self for the organization and give all of the best things that you can give. So although of course it's a legal requirement and I suppose a moral requirement, I would like to think, to meet somebody's reasonable adjustments, and that should absolutely be done anyway. A good way of phrasing it can be to kind of say, these are the things I need. It's important we get them implemented, and let's do this as soon as possible so that I can be my best self and give my all to this opportunity that I'm really looking forward to starting. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that that is some kind of guidance. Oh, again, thank you for the kind words. That's made me smile. I'm not reading out people's names because this has been recorded and I'm conscious about things like consent. We've got a bit of time, so if anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to pop them in. Any other thoughts? If not, I'll have a think. If there's anything you want to go into further while we've got some time, I'm more than happy to do that. I hope you don't mind me just sitting here and glugging my water while I have a think. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for the kind words. I'm really glad it's been helpful. I think I said this at the start, but I know a few people weren't here, but I think a lot of the times conversations about the more specific parts of being a student or a graduate with a chronic illness often get missed out of the conversation, even in conversations about disability more generally. The unique challenges of chronic illness aren't always included as a part of that conversation. So it means the world that to be able to delve into this a little bit more today. And Astriid, we are hoping to put on more events specifically for chronically ill students. Oh, maybe that's a good thing to do, actually. I mean, we've got a list of things we'd like to do, but if there's anything that you hear today feel would be helpful to see in the future, or perhaps you'd like further information on a further event, if you have any ideas or suggestions, please feel free to put them in the chat or feedback to us at some point if you'd rather do that privately. But that would be really valuable for us. And of course, we want to make sure that anything we do is given back to you as well. So yeah, I'll put that out there. Where can we find out more about future events to share with others? So I would say the best place is Astriid's social media. We will always endeavour to record the events, so I imagine they would be available on our YouTube channel, which is just Astriid. But yeah, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and we have our mailing list as well. So if you are following us on at least one of those platforms, the chances are you will see events. And we do quite a lot of events, actually, not just those for students and graduates. So there might even be other things you spot, and loads of other resources generally as well. We do endeavour to put out stuff that is genuinely helpful, you know, not just like the generic stuff, stuff that's genuinely helpful. So I hope you'll find value in following what we're doing online as well. There's a nice bunch of people at Astriid. And if you, I suppose for these student events, if you follow me on social media, I usually end up yelling about those events as well. I'm at Life of Pippa. Check out, I've linked everything above. I don't want to keep you too long unnecessarily, so I will put out one last call for questions. Please feel free. Thoughts, questions, ideas for future sessions. But of course, like I said, if you would prefer to discuss anything privately, please feel free to get in touch with Astriid. If it goes to social media, it'll probably be me that you're talking to for the foreseeable future. If you go through the website, if you have a job-specific inquiry, that will go to our candidate coordination team. And I think with that, yeah, let's call it a day. Nice and early finish. You can go and put your feet up now. Have a well-deserved rest break, I think all of us. But I just wanted to say thank you again for your time. Thank you so much for being here. It's so lovely to hear that it's been helpful. And I really do wish you all the best, not just with your search for work experience and internships, but with student life with a chronic illness. People with you, I don't think you hear this enough, but you're doing a really, really good job. I know it's difficult, and I know it often seems as though the people around you don't realize just how difficult it can be. So please know that you're doing an amazing job, and you've got this. You've got this. I believe in you. Motivational talk on this Tuesday afternoon. Right, okay, brilliant. Thank you so much again, everyone. I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you next time. Bye.